Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Timothy. Timothy Lim is a naturally curious individual with a passion for exploring new ideas and tools to optimize and enhance learning experiences. As a learning solution strategist, Tim partners with organizations to design innovative and tailored preliminary solutions to address complex learning challenges. With a background in advising clients on learning strategy solutions and fostering partnerships across the region, Tim enables organizations to stay ahead of the curve, empowering teams to adapt, grow, and achieve lasting impact. I'm sure you enjoy today's webinar and find it insightful as well as we cover the learning trends. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Tim.
Hey, thanks so much, Zach, and a good morning or good afternoon to everyone who's on the webinar today. First of all, really great to have you with us. I know for some of you it's the middle of the hour, so it's a little tougher sometimes to just work your meetings around it. So we, first of all, really appreciate you being here, and thanks very much, Zach, for that. What I realize now is a really verbose intro to myself, but in any case, if I could just summarize that, my name's Tim. I work in GP strategies and I partner with clients really to help them find solutions to the challenges that they face, no matter how complex, no matter how simple. And first of all, I also want to wish everyone a very, very happy Lunar or Chinese New Year, depending on how you'd like to wish it. We've just come back, and today is actually the last day of festivities, if I'm not wrong. So, wishing everyone who celebrates that a very, very happy Chinese and Lunar New Year. But I suppose the first thing we can do to kick things off in this hour is really if I could get you to navigate to the chat function on this webinar and share one word, right, that represents how you're feeling about 2025. I'll give you some time as you're going. Paul, thank you very much to hear that you're excited about it, hopeful, very optimistic responses so far. When I was preparing for this webinar, and I was thinking, what are some of the things and trying to anticipate some of the responses that will be coming through. Fiona, you've mentioned transformation. That's an interesting one, and I think that we'll be speaking a lot about transformation today, especially in the realm of artificial intelligence. And Jane, just there looking forward, and Sally as a change agent, change management. Yeah, I'm very happy to see some of these words, some of these phrases, because as we talk about how learning as an industry is transforming, how businesses are also transforming with many of these external pressures, change, being an agent for change, managing that change and managing that transformation is something that we will be experiencing quite a lot. And thanks so much, Yami, as well for the uncertainty, the reality that, hey, we don't really know necessarily what's going to happen. And very, very thankful for everyone for the optimistic thoughts as well. I'll love to keep the comments coming in. Please use the chat function as much as you would like. We have quite a number of people in the room, and I imagine the shared knowledge among all of us is incredible right now. So if you want to use the chat for questions, if you want to use the chat for comments, or if you want to use the chat to answer someone else's questions, please feel free to. Let's make this a session where we can really share knowledge. And love the most best thing that I could experience today is I could learn just as much from all of you in today's session. But moving on from that, well, if you've been with us for some time now and following us for some time, you know that Learning Trends is an annual affair that GP Strategies does. And really, it's a consolidation of our observations that we've made over the last year or so. Given the breadth of our operations globally, right, we've done this webinar once already, this 2025 version once already for our markets in America. And a big shout out to our Chief Learning and Innovation Officer, Matt Donovan, who's laid a lot of that groundwork for today's content. But of course, we've made sure that we're running a dedicated webinar for the time zone of the AMEA markets, but also we've supplemented our observations regionally for this edition as well. We've identified trends, made predictions from the observations that we've gathered over the last year coming into 2025. And coming into it and setting up the context of why we do learning trends every year is really that we have the belief that L&D as an organizational function within the broader business, within the broader organization, right, is at an inflection point. We're at a point where we can change how we contribute to the business and accordingly also how we are perceived by the business. Right, so Matt shared this story that it was really similar for supply chain management some 20 to 25 years ago, right? Historically, a lot of the focus on supply chain management was on, for example, warehouse location, the distance. It had from your warehouse to your retailers, the costs that came along with that, distribution nodes, and ultimately working with the unions, right? And all of that mostly changed with the entry of Amazon, with the entry of Walmart, where we started seeing not only the restructuring of relationships with vendors and partners in supply chain management, but also the genesis of capturing data, utilizing that data, and obtaining insights. So it was more than just saying, hey, we've sold a standing fan, inventory is on a -1 now, and we need to restock that inventory. But going beyond that insight to utilize data to identify new revenue streams, identify emerging trends, identify customer behaviors as well, right? And the function of supply chain management, which was previously cost containment, was reframed to that a role of competitive advantage. So I know I've spoken a lot about supply chain management, but in that same vein, right, that's our belief of where L&D is right now. Right, we're in this position, and it's an exciting position, right? As I see here, we're looking forward, we're hopeful, and a position where we can move the perception, where we can contribute differently from one of a function of cost containment to a function of competitive advantage, right? And really organizations that can help workforces transform quickly, that can help workforces adjust to disruptions, help adjust to disruptions, to pivot to disruptions, can be so much better positioned in terms of providing a competitive advantage. So that's how we think L&D can really elevate itself to deliver increased value, driving tighter alignment with businesses and its workforce. And I hope that provides some context to why learning trends, is something that is yeah, commonplace for what we do at GP Strategies, so that we can just drive that value of our customers. Right. And from our conversations with partners and clients over the last year, learning organizations are evolving. Right. This transformation is happening over a continuum. Some are moving at a quicker pace than others, some are in much earlier stages. But in this case, in any case, there are some key areas that we thought we'd bring up before we went straight into the trends. And one that I've personally myself seen with clients through some of the work that we do out of Singapore is in the dimension of strategic focus, where learning is changing from being much more organization centric to focusing much more on the learner experience and learner relevance, right? And when I say learner experience, I'm really meaning, in virtue of the time that they have, the time that they can afford to take off the job, the realistic cognitive capacity that they have to learn, and in that amount of time, and the relevance of that content. And these are some of the few things that we ourselves, have been sharing with organizations to pay attention to. And we've been seeing that very encouragingly has become a focus, at least within Singapore, right? In the domain of workforce, it's evolving from just human to humans plus AI. And we'll speak about that quite a bit later on as we, come in the theme of transformation, the themes of change management and being a change agent, right? The way change is managed is also another domain. Change is being much less or much decreasingly episodic, right? It's not as discrete, it's not a particular initiative with a specific start and end, but we're seeing change as something that's much more continuous, something that comes much more so in waves, and therefore the response to that is really having change embedded into different processes, into different workflows, embedded into learning as well, right? Making it much more agile and recognized as a core component for everything that we do. Um, Learning operations, another domain where we're seeing, and it's already moving, right, from being siloed, sorry, to connecting with talent, to connecting with business, to IT, possibly, right, to better partner the organization and other functions. And accordingly, from that, the outputs or the products from learning are also going to expand from being courses and events to also include assets that empower and help learners create extremely relevant, on demand learning experiences for themselves. And we'll come to that later on when we speak about trends and some of the other thoughts that we've had in the Asia region or the AMEA region, if I can say. Lastly, it's really just measurement, and measurement naturally will push itself from learning metrics to really connect and offer insights, not just to learning impact, not to just how well learners are having knowledge transferred to them, retaining that knowledge, but also how it impacts people, how it impacts businesses, and how it impacts the organization as a whole. And really, this is just a bird's eye view. There's so many things that we could talk about today. But with some alignment from Matt Donovan, we can go straight into learning trend number one, and diving into it. That's really from experimenting to embracing AI, and this is really going to form the foundation, or I would say the premise of a lot of some of the trends that we'll be seeing for the rest of today. Okay, so moving into it again, please feel free to use the chat if anything's not super clear. If anything is, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in. If you'd like to just add in a point, super happy for you to do so as well. But what I have on the screen now is really a familiar journey, I imagine, for most of us going back all the way to late 2022, right? And that's when I remembered sharing ChatGPT with my colleagues a couple of weeks before it got picked up by the mainstream media, before we saw it in the news. And a few weeks later, them coming back to me, I'm not sure whether they even saw my email, and sharing the tool back with me because they found it so helpful in their day to day, right? Um, but if I can just refresh your memory on that, basically OpenAI launched a chat interface in front of a large language model and invited the world to test it, to use it, to train it, to make it smarter, and also find vulnerabilities for it. And in that period, I remember that we saw some really interesting ways that GPT-3 was being stress tested and utilized. And in that period, it was all at the first node that you see here on the leftmost of the screen. It was at the individual level, right? Where individuals were experimenting, accessing this new, really strong processing tool and seeing what we could do with it. We've never had the chance before that to test something of that level. And if I recall back then, some of the free features that came with GPT-3 were much more plenty than they particularly do now. And on top of that, you had Bard that came out from Google that's basically now Gemini. But a lot of that stage, a lot of that phase in the adoption journey was individuals like us exploring the capability of these large language models and exploring what we could produce out of it, right? But then we move down the line, and this is where perhaps um, some organizations, or perhaps most organizations, are really depending on the focus of the business. But this is the stage of the internal, where it's the central of the screen right now, that we've seen organizations start to create their own internal GPTs. Or bring in models, for example, Copilot, if you're on the Microsoft ecosystem, into their own controlled environment, right? So it's part of their actual cloud environment or their intranet network, working with only their data in that contained space. For example, we use GPT-4 in an Azure environment, which wraps around workflows with regard to an assessment portal, right? Basically, it's the front end of it is a SCORM. It pushes information through, and we get the model, the large language model, to grade some of these short answer questions. And I'd say really in this foundational portion, most organizations are here today, right? We've seen clients with AI-powered platforms even that help employees assess their skills, explore potential career paths, and really bring value to the people in the business, right? But ultimately, seeing organizations bring it within their contained environment and apply it to their data more so than having it out speaking to different parts of the web, right? Still within their contained systems. And the third phase, which I think we're going to start see organizations get into slowly, is the phase of the integration, or what we call integrated, right? Where we start seeing AI integrated into reimagined workflows. And these imagined workflows are where we're really thinking hard about the jobs that we're doing and intentionally bringing AI into that process of that job. So that's trend number one, right? We'll delegate parts of our tasks to AI ultimately to run things quicker and give us back some of that time, or to supplement some of the generative capabilities and give us a broader perspective to things. But let me dive deeper into that a little bit more rather than just talk at it at this high level. Right? I did want to show also some evidence to really give you a sense of the momentum and the drive of us going down those three phases, eventually to a point of integration, right? And here's looking at the adoption of AI across different functions, domains, and occupations out there. And I will call out this was data from 2024 even. So you can imagine how much more, that momentum we've gained from adopting AI for organizations has grown, right? So what we like about this here is how we're seeing AI adoption across the board, right? It's not limited to any single particular domain. We're seeing journalists and software developers, some of these heavier adopters of tech, and it's pretty obvious, I suppose, how some of them might use it in their day to day. And of course, significantly, they are more exposed occupations. But at the same time, we also know that exposure is increasingly bleeding to other roles as well. But even for those less exposed occupations to the, I would say, the threat of disruption, right? For example, HR professionals, customer service representatives, these are also occupations that see the value and are adopting the use of AI in their work and at home, right? In the case of financial advisors, maybe not so much, but they are using it outside of their work as well. And zooming into it, right, looking at journalists, we can already see that between those who have used it at work, the darkest blue on this chart, and those who've used it but not at work, that makes up a good 75%, a good three quarters of that entire population that was surveyed. Right? And I think that really speaks to the mass, to the volume, and the weight of that momentum in our very inevitable journey towards the integration of AI into our processes, into our workflows, and even if the organization doesn't mandate it, even if it's maybe not even permitted, right? Individuals are definitely pushing hard in the experimentation, are definitely pushing it and desire to use it. And if I can share a little bit more about that, it's not just how individuals are using it already, but even their perceived outlook on the integration of AI. Right. On the other hand, here we're looking at the optimism of things, right? And across the board, when you look at the overall work experience, the chart on your far left, we were seeing some heavy users who've made up 21% of this entire respondents, keep a very optimistic outlook of how it's going to affect their overall work experience. They've tested it, they've tried it, and they think it's going to be good for them. But what really strikes me also is that non-users, right, albeit they are a smaller sample size of this study, but they have almost a unanimous optimism to the effect that generative AI will have on their work experience, even though they haven't had the chance to test it, to try it. So in essence, I think this illustrates individuals' hopefulness in embracing AI's internalization and its eventual integration into our businesses, into our organizations. And that's all being reinforced over time with amazing studies that are being done and published to show how AI really does elevate and help people in the flow of work. And of course, at the same time, domains that we're discovering where they don't do such a great job, right? And that speaks, I guess, later to some of the things that we'll be exploring when we're talking about keeping humans in the flow of the loop and keeping us, not removing us from that process altogether. Right, but with that momentum that's building towards integration, right, and all the expectations that individuals are having, I think it's also helpful to speak to how we can think about AI, how we can think about its use cases and the impacts that it brings to us ultimately. And there are three main areas, as you can see on the left here. And the first is that when we think about AI and bringing AI into workflow, we can consider automation, specifically smart automation, right? What can we have it do in terms of tasks, in terms of activities, perhaps to free up time, perhaps to supplement the generative or creative domain of things as well. But we can also then see how can we get it to generate content, like I just said, and that's what's really captivated most people about these large language models, right? You put in a request, it generates some content and some outputs based on that input. Right? And the last area is prediction, being able to analyze these large data sets to identify trends and to extract insights from that data. And historically, that's been something that people struggle with handling at a very large scale, right? I myself can't recall which philosopher it was specifically who spoke about this, but I think it was Derek Parfait who said that when we get to the size of millions, we have this inability to comprehend it to the same way, the same rational thought that we do with smaller numbers in the hundreds or the thousands maybe. But with the use of AI, right, with the introduction of that, that can make things much more manageable. So thinking about how we incorporate AI is effectively is a very crucial part of that integration and adoption. But at the same time, flowing from that, the roles that AI can play on your right hand side here are just as important, right? How we use AI not just as a tool, but eventually involving it in the work we do to the degree of an assistant, to the degree of a peer, or even possibly in the future to the degree of a manager. Right? And I know there are many different emotive responses to that. Feel free to put them in the chat again. But even our chief innovation and learning officer Matt initially felt that resistance to the idea of that. But really, if we take a step back and consider the actual work that a manager or a leader does, right, would there be aspects of the role or job that could be facilitated or supported through AI? And my initial thought to that is absolutely yes. I think that will allow human leaders and managers to focus on the meaningful connections, applying wisdom to solve problems. Again, something we go down the line, but balancing and freeing up time in that way allows us to really step back, reassess roles and tasks, and break them down differently. So I know we've spoken about ITV. Let's put that into practice here. And this is really an example to illustrate how we can really integrate AI, right? And when we talk about that last phase of it, we internalize it and then we integrate it. And this is something that we're going to do to reimagine the workflow here. The organizational goal is for consistent, high quality performance conversations. So we're going to have a little bit of a look at the workflow, right? So imagine these performance conversations, these performance reviews. We know how critical these discussions are, right? AI can play a huge role in enhancing it rather than replacing the human connection in these integrations. And the reason that we've chosen to use the example of a performance conversation is because it's absolutely crucial for driving employee engagement, for driving productivity and overall performance. I'm sure everyone here on this call, being a learning professional, agrees. We've worked with clients, who've put prioritize really large budgets for this as well, to make sure that their managers are best equipped to drive those conversations. Right. So we've mapped out a little bit of an example of 9 key steps in a performance conversation, and this exercise really represents the art of the possible. Okay, I know it's a long journey, it takes time, it may not be completed in 2025, but again, we're looking forward and bolstering ourselves for the trends that are coming, making sure that we have the tools to implement those transformations and to manage that change. And when we look at this, the question I want to ask is, what if we can enhance these conversations to be more effective, right? So what is in the workflow of a performance conversation? Well, to have a successful conversation, the first thing is definitely we have to remember that we need to have these conversations, right? At GP, we do this every quarter, but it's not just about remembering to have it. As managers, you also need to make sure that you're able to schedule these conversations effectively, right? You don't want to put it in a time where, the quarter is closing and you have a terrible time finding just the space to chat about it, pushing calendar invites back and forth. We want to make sure that we put this effectively into our schedules. Step 3 is, well, we have to collect feedback, and maybe organizations already do it with a tool. If not, you have to hunt for that feedback on your own for that particular employee that you're speaking to. You have to also locate the prior document that you use for that conversation. What do you speak to that employee about, and ultimately prepare and refresh, right? And that comes in many forms. You might be hitting up a just-in-time skills video on the LMS or going through LinkedIn Learning. And if you or I have some time, there's also the option to bring in a coach or a mentor to give me immediate feedback on how I can improve that performance conversation I'm about to have. And arguably, and I say arguably because I think there's good reason to that this may not be true. Step 7 is possibly the most important thing, right? Having that dynamic, engaging conversation that truly meets your employee where they are, right? Building that partnership with them, fostering that trust, and also exchanging that feedback to set them up for future success. And after these great conversations, it doesn't end there. You have steps 8 and 9. You still have to document it, you have to file it, and you have to eventually make sure that follow up is being done, right? So now we take a step back and we analyze why these conversations don't always go as well as we prefer. One thing that I like to call it is because every single step on this workflow that you see here right now is a potential failure point, right? So we want to look at it from a way of integration. How can we have AI step in to help? So for example, we've using this performance conversation. Right. AI performance conversation agent could be created, it could be employed, and could assist in facilitating or making sure that these conversations occur. Right. Monitor schedules, prompt actions, and basically say something like, hey, Tim, I noticed you don't have a third quarter conversation scheduled with Jen. Would you like me to schedule that? And I could go back to it and say, absolutely, please just go ahead. I've got something else to do. And it would check then for existing meetings and add one to the calendar if needed. And, we could build in those rules to make sure that it's doing so effectively as well. Right. Additionally, it could also then suggest relevant questions for gathering that feedback. Could analyze Jen's recent collaborations with some of the other colleagues like Ash to really collect feedback from them, right? And say, hey, here are 10 people that Jen has been working with. These are the people. Would you like me to send an email out really to solicit some of the feedbacks? These are the questions that we think you could be asking as well to get a more holistic idea of your employees' performance, right? And with preparation as well, it's gonna, well, if it's part of the system, it can locate that prior documentation. And when it comes to preparation, that AI can suggest relevant resources, such as the newly released podcasts on the art of great conversations, or it might prompt like, hey, would you like to take a look at this document, right? And I've highlighted this in pink because there's so much that can be done at this point in time. And if we're taking it even another step further, right, with coaching and mentoring, you can even imagine employing an avatar, an AI coach to help myself prepare for that conversation to get feedback on the way that I'm delivering it. So, and AI is not going to do any of that conversation, right? What we're suggesting here is the shift of focus as a learning unit, as a learning function, simply from teaching someone how to have a better performance conversation, but instead thinking, what if we enabled them with an AI powered conversation agent that would actively support them through the process? Right? And really, this is really, as I said, an example of how we can look at process, how we can start integrating into the workflows. And as time marches on, we expect that this is just going to be a much larger focus. So, with key takeaways here, it's really that shift away from individuals experimenting with AI to organizations actively integrating it. I can't give you a timeline on that, but you can imagine that that might take maybe a year or two, but different organizations at different point will be building on that, right? That's going to involve not just understanding the consequences of AI adoption, but what will happen. It's something that will happen outside of the learning function will have to adapt to as well. As we say, organizations will have to rethink how work is done, right? Looking at those workflows, just like before, identifying which aspects can be effectively complemented or reinforced with AI to enhance the success rates and create learning environments that better support learners. And lastly, that's all a change implementation project. Hence, also happy to see some of those um, responses on the chat earlier, right? And this initiative needs to leverage agile change management principles. There's a lot of focus that needs to be placed on ensuring a smooth transition to really maximize the benefits of AI-driven learning. So moving on to trend number two, it's just as we are about half an hour in, trend number two is really about building wisdom, and there's a number of things that I'd like to talk about around the challenge of building wisdom that informs trends three and four later on. But really, just to contextualize it, we can expect that there's going to be a shift from the human workforce to the human and AI workforce. And we are all experiencing this transformation in some way or another right now, whether we're at the experiment phase or the internal phase, or if you've already embarked on integrating AI, right? And this is something that historically we've never questioned before. We've never questioned the role of humans in the workforce because it was inherently human. The only other example I could have thought of was if you were to work on a farm and you had animals, but inherently in almost every other case, right, the workforce was always human. And we get exposure to that idea of how that would change, right, to humans and AI from films like Star Wars, from Futurama. But now with AI integration, we really have to rethink what that looks like. Right. And most of the films that we see, unless it's a dystopian novel, based on a dystopian novel, the output of that is really like the well done implementation, right? So this brings us to trend two, which I consider one of the most important elements, and that is building wisdom. Right. Building wisdom is all about focusing on investing on the human side of that human and AI equation, right? As we look to the future, productivity will ultimately come from the collaboration between both humans and AI. And success is going to depend on how we apply AI to solve some of these problems. So looking into it, we explore the balance between AI and human intelligence, or as I prefer to call it, and if you might have heard it on the other version, they call it intelligence. I prefer to call it knowledge, right? And we'll explore that understanding between human plus AI and the evolving dynamic and distinction between knowledge and wisdom. So when Matt was speaking about this on the US version of this learning trends, he shared how it really resonated with him, the concept of knowledge versus wisdom. And one of the examples that he gave was this post-match interview uh, with a rugby player, Ireland's centre Brian O'Driscoll. And Ireland have been doing amazing in the Six Nations the past couple of weekends. But in this case, Brian O'Driscoll was an amazing player for Irish rugby, and in a post-match interview, really as a cheeky jab to another player, he described knowledge and wisdom in in a really funny way and said, knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are a fruit. However, wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So, as much as Beauty was taking a cheeky jab, we're going to have to approach this challenge of wisdom and uncover our true role in this new landscape, right? How do we work with AI? How does AI work with us? And how do we bring the value of wisdom to the actual work that we do? And I think the way that we should see that is really that moving forward, it's not going to be all about technical skills. Right? When we talk about upskilling, sorry, we often identify a handful of key skills that are essentials for humans to thrive in a human plus AI workforce. But it's often not just about the technical proficiency for someone to produce, for someone to succeed, for someone to perform. It's equally about improving human skills, or as I like to call it, the mindsets, the values driven content. And that's bringing in things like critical thinking, curiosity, creativity, innovation, teaching and training, interpersonal skills, making the emphasis on that. Like, how do we harness and enable these skills to support human development? Right? And ultimately, it's going to be about a balance of both aspects, about leveraging AI while ensuring we cultivate uniquely human capabilities that drive progress. And I would say that the key takeaway is that as we look to grow and develop our workforce in this human plus AI era, we must be cognizant of balancing these technical skills with these human centric capabilities, not just because AI can't at this point in time act on them, but because humans are still a part of that workforce, are still part of um, our producers, right? And additionally, we need to focus on cultivating wisdom within organizations and to ensure that AI, serves as a tool to enhance human decision making rather than to replace it altogether. Uh, so moving on from that, as I mentioned earlier, building wisdom is an easy thing to talk about, but around the need to build wisdom as a trend as we go into 2025, there are also challenges that come about with it. And trend three is about real application, and I call it real application really as a contrast to artificial application, artificially induced by artificial intelligence, right? But this is really a segue from building wisdom, and we'll come back to this in a while. But I want to talk about the challenge first of building wisdom, right? So let's return to that challenge of building wisdom, or maybe what I'll call it now is cultivating wisdom for an organization. And like many other complex tasks, cultivating wisdom is a lot easier to be discussed, it's a lot easier to speak about, and much harder to implement effectively. But let's try to break it down in the next couple of minutes or so, lah. Right? So looking back, we explored that to cultivate wisdom, we require both the technical and the human skills. Right? That way we know our roles and we make sure that we are using AI to enhance our work rather than to replace some of the work that we do. But when it comes to cultivating wisdom, these two aspects, these two buckets, like technical skills and human skills, they are a priori, depending on where you're from, right? And to a significant degree, in its rawest format, right? This is knowledge basically learned through first principles. It's deduced. It's untested theory in its very raw form, and that's how the nature of these skills are when they are typically being transferred in a training or in a course. If you remember what I mentioned earlier. But these a priori skills do not encompass the entirety of cultivating wisdom. In fact, since we're getting epistemic about it, there's also the a posteriori, right? A significant portion of wisdom is developed through lived experiences, right? Personal exposure, personal experience, organizational context, and cultural background. And these are dimensions of wisdom that require real world experiences, that require someone to have gone through it before, right? A posteriori and nature, as I mentioned. But don't worry too much about those terms. The point is simply that to cultivate wisdom, we need lived experiences. But at the same time, and this was one of the other challenges of it, is that we face some form of a paradox, right? Or what I thought was more accurately a double whammy. Because when you look at lived experiences, as AI automates routine tasks, right, and we integrate it into the workflows just like we did earlier, right? That's going to result in fewer opportunities to gain hands-on experience. And take this as a hyperbole, right? In its most extreme form, that opportunity is going to be really, really low. Where we are as organizations right now, maybe this isn't the most pressing matter, but in the future, that's something we can possibly look forward to, right? At the same time, these tasks, the remaining tasks, increasingly require wisdom-driven decision making, right? So you can see the sort of tension here, right? As a consequence of integrating AI in the future, right? We can expect that there's going to be less opportunities for that lived learning experience, whereas AI is still demanding that we skill our individuals, skill our learners to be able to perform these particular tasks that require lived experiences. So this shift raises a really critical question: is on how can we cultivate wisdom in an environment where experiential learning opportunities may start diminishing. And well, I think there's a rather obvious solution for that. And that really is if we can use we can create those lived experience opportunities ourselves, right? And as a learning function, embed it into the learning that we're dispensing, whether it's a course, whether it's a program, or in those AI assisted, AI powered tools that we were speaking about earlier, right? Effectively, we want to canvas lived experience in any form of skills development, right? Have portions of it as learners are developing their technical skills, as learners are developing their human skills. We want to make sure that there's an element of practice of real application, as we called it earlier. So what could this look like? Well, a number of things, whether it's simulations or on-the-job practice and application, having them report on the actions that they've taken or real-world problems that they are solving along with projects that they do. Right? And that's going to be so valuable by adding that complexity to their learning, whether it's a human-driven complexity when they're collaborating with someone in that learning opportunity, or whether it's part of the process as they're going through that learning opportunity, to really give learners the full experience and understand the nuances that typically don't come with just the a priori portions. So really as a key takeaway, I think, looking into 2025, and we're seeing this already, that learning is involving much more experiential methods, simulations, applied practices, real world problem solving, and some of the stuff that we do on modern learning. Organizations are taking it up for many other reasons as well, but as things progress, this is going to be so much more important, so much more of a priority as we design learning for organizations and for our businesses. Trend number 4 is all about reclaiming the human connection. And to really understand this, we'll have to go back to the challenge that we outlined earlier when speaking about cultivating wisdom, which I'll do in a moment. But, reclaiming human connection is something that I would say is a continued trend from whenever we left COVID back in 2022 and returned to the office to some degree, right? I think that highlighted the importance of human connection, and all we're doing here is really bolstering and making sure that we continue prioritizing human connection in the work that we do. But on the screen now again is where we spoke about that double whammy of artificial intelligence on cultivating wisdom, specifically in the domain of lived experiences. And in that same model, in that same vein, we can dive deeper into lived experiences and understand that that includes the elements of relationships, includes the elements of connection, really. So in that same manner of how AI inhibits and demands, we're talking now more about things like organic collaboration, shared human achievements, and camaraderie. Right? And what we're saying is that AI has the potential to inhibit these social elements in the workplace as well, right? to diminish your shared human experiences, your shared human achievements, I think is the most important thing, all while still simultaneously requiring an increase in the demand for skills and the ability to cultivate these actively human-centric qualities, right? And we know these elements are super critical to organizations, right? Whether it's in driving performance or enhancing overall productivity as a broad stroke, lah, right? And I want to take a pause here and take a moment to emphasize that I am not an advocate against AI integration, which would be incredibly odd to say given the amount of time I spent at the start on our first trend. But I'm not a doomsday bell ringer as well. The reason that I want to bring this out really is so that we can see how it shapes some of the trends for 2025 and beyond, and recognize some of the potential challenges that we can start to prepare and mitigate for. So depending on where you are on that journey that I showed earlier of internalizing or integrating, right, with most organizations still in the implementation of, oh sorry, in the internal phase, right, this may not be an immediate concern, but at this stage with AI still being adopted, this particular impact may not yet be felt on the larger scale, right? But as AI implementation transitions from a new initiative as we go through the year to business as usual, and when it's fully integrated, and as the next phase of our adoption journey becomes the primary focus, these challenges do grow in significance. And organizations must ensure that ultimately nothing falls through the cracks by, well, proactively being aware and planning against these issues now rather than reacting to them later. So the solution, I guess, is in the same manner, in the same vein, and just as we've discussed the role of lived experiences and wisdom in meeting social and human needs, learning must also be intentionally designed to incorporate these elements that foster organic collaboration, right? That foster the ability to achieve together and also team building or camaraderie, as I call it here. And yeah, this will definitely be part of a broader people strategy, not just for learning. Um, right? It will ensure that learning is not just about individual development, but reinforcing connections and collaboration within organizations. So, given this, it's an area that deserves greater focus when designing and learning experiences and different touch points as we go into 2025 and beyond. Right. If you recall, we also discussed the expectation that learning should evolve to provide on-demand access to tools, right? In the very first portion, we are talking about the different domains and having these tools tailored to learner-specific needs and their moments of urgency. By having that as one of the domains of evolution, that doesn't mean that we're moving away entirely from traditional courses and programs. And I wanted to call that out earlier because instead, the way we should see this relationship is that we're really supplementing our traditional programs. They may not look the same and it may look as if we're moving away from them entirely, but we're not. Some of these fundamental things, such as mindsets, fundamental things such as connection, will remain within the design and development of our programs. So, key takeaways, yep, learning must foster organic collaboration and it must foster team achievement in the future as we go along the way. And new integrations are really to supplement and not to entirely replace traditional learning. Okay, I'm going to move on lastly for trend number 5, and that's actually our last trend for today. It's really the increasingly immersive and AI enabled learning that will be available for learners within our organization. So consider the ability, right, to create a series of learning agents, including learner facing AI agents, right? Organizational avatars, as I like to call them. So, for example, in an employee onboarding program, a mixed team of humans and AI agents could extend the reach of human facilitators to ensure that new joiners have the support wherever it's needed, right? So these avatars, as you can see, can enhance the learning experience, extend the team's capabilities, and promote practice, promote mastery, promote application of some of these skills, whether for new joiners or if you want to use it even in future programs by incorporating what we spoke before, simulations and practice environments. Right? We can build and integrate these feedback mechanisms to really guide learners towards attaining that skill proficiency. So as learners progress, they can transition to human-involved simulations after working it out with the AI coach, after working out the avatar, right? Refining their skills in a more interactive environment, but also allowing the better use of resources, better use of times from human coaches, right? So looking ahead, it's going to be crucial to explore how we can not just design and develop learning, but also enhance it with AI-driven immersion and adaptive learning experiences. So this is really to the point of not just integrating it into the workflows and seeing how we can drive proficiency there, but also integrating into some of the experiences that we already have. Again, we're not moving away entirely from traditional learning, we are supplementing it. Right, so building on this, we need to consider how to drive evidence-based AI tool exploration. And while there are many, many tools that are emerging, we have to be strategic in evaluating them. When is the right time that we use them? What are they good for? What are they not good for, right? There are many things that, and this is not going to be a case of, yep, I'll sleep on it tonight and I'll make a decision. Then it's one of those cases where we do have to lean in, we do have to make an informed, thorough decision. Right, we have 10 categories of tools that ready to share today. AI chatbots, AI course generation, some of the things that we've seen with partners, tech partners that we work with as well, safety culture to mention one of their names, AI video generation to really ease the development of learning content as part of wider programs that we do, AI audio generation in the same vein, AI image generation in the same vein as well, and AI language translations to really operationalize and drive scale within regions like ASEAN, for example, where there's so many different languages, so many different cultures, and really speeding up that process of bringing a program to market. AI for business intelligence on the side of measurement, AI-enabled content catalog. I myself personally have not seen so much of that, but AI presentation generation, putting getting your stakeholders involved much quicker, and AI coaching, really allowing them to obtain that feedback and immediate response, right? And there are a couple of experimental features as well in deep learner personalization, facial recognition and biometrics with AI coaches, sentiment analysis in tone, sometimes in text and in speaking, and cognitive profiles that you can create to really individualize that learning. Yep, so key takeaways here really is to create a sustainable approach to innovation. With so many things coming about, having those systems in place, having those processes, the evaluative tools, and I think we can share some of that as well. There's a poll later asking if you'd be interested. What is the plan? What is the roadmap? What are the things that I need to take note of when we delve into innovation with these tools? Security clearances, vulnerabilities, things of that portion, right? Other key takeaways to be an advocate for the learner in the experience and not get lost in all the cool toys that are coming up, but to make sure that we are doing this for the learner, and also to get in the habit of prototyping, testing, and evolving some of the work, some of the learning, designing that we do. So that about wraps up today's webinar, and thank you very much again for spending your or what I would say is your lunch break with me on talking about certain trends that are emerging. Firstly, with AI being implemented, being integrated, and the knock-on effects of all of that. We'd love to find out a little bit more about what you'd like to follow up with, and I'm just going to run a poll right now and to launch it here. Just let us know, if you'd love to find out more about some of the AI-powered learning solutions when we spoke about the workflows and reinforcing those workflows, supplementing that, or some of the implementation and integration work that we've done. If we can help you as you're on that journey to internalize, or on that journey to integrate, we have some of those resources. We'd be happy to take that conversation further. Or if there are modern learning methodologies that we can supplement or we can share a little bit more about to reach to make sure that there's human connection, to make sure that we're building wisdom, right? It's all the above. Just feel free to drop us in a note. We'll make sure that we follow up with you if we think there's something that may be helpful. If you would respond to us and tell us, the challenges you're facing, we'd be more than happy to see how we can help you as you embark on the journey into 2025 and beyond. So yeah, for anyone who might feel uncertainty and the negative sense of it, I hope today's webinar has bolstered and given you some confidence into the exciting things I think that we can look forward in 2025. And remember, in any case, you're not alone. There's tons of resource across the web. There's tons of resource on our end as well. Just let us know how we can help. If not, thank you very much. The poll's still on, so feel free to change your answers or to let us know what you'd like to hear from us. But again, that's me, Timothy Lim, for today. Thank you very much all for joining.
This webinar was brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we help organizations transform through their people. You can access more webinars or download additional resources by visiting the GP Strategies Resource Library. The link is on your screen and in the description.